let's dive into nutrition, because I think this is something too that if people are not eating well for a period of time, they can definitely feel like their immune system start to suffer.
Exactly. So, this is a really hot and controversial topic because if there's one, you can talk about anything to somebody, but when you're talking about the food that they're putting into their body, it's a very personal thing. There's a lot of personal tastes here. And so, let's first, before we even delve into this topic, not even talk about the type of food that you're putting into the body, but the timing of food that you put into your body. So that's something that people, I think, can generally agree with. Here's a truism that we really need to take into consideration when we're talking about the timing of when we put food into our body. And that's this, is that per calorie, per calorie, your body deals with sugars and carbohydrates much better, and actually all calories, much better early in the morning and throughout the day than later in the day. What I mean to say is this, is that insulin sensitivity is highest during the morning hours and not during the evening hours. So if you wanted to take in the same amount of calories in a number of people, but you wanted to have the minimal amount of insulin response to dealing with those calories, you would want to front load those calories as much as possible. And that's exactly what I would recommend. People have talked about intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is simply when you concentrate in a particular day the amount of calories that you have over a very small amount of time. So you leave the rest of the day for all of the body's practices of fasting and all those things that are taking place. Let me just step back a little bit to explain why that's really important. An analogy I like to use is a friend that I had back in high school who used to work for Disneyland, but he did not work for Disneyland during the day. He worked for Disneyland at night. And he would tell me all of these stories about things that would happen at the Disneyland park there in Anaheim at night. For you see, after the park closed, there was, for the day, there were gardeners that came out that did the weeding. There were people in janitorial that cleaned the streets, emptied the trash cans. They restocked the gift shops. They cleared out the cash registers. The engineers came in and shut down the rides, checked for breaks in the steel or cracks. They would make sure all the things are working. The maintenance were done on all of these rides. All of this stuff was happening at night so that the park would open up brand new, fresh. Like you would walk into that park at 8 o'clock in the morning. There was not a piece of gum anywhere on the ground. All of the flowers at It's a Small World was placed exactly where they needed to be. All of any flowers that had died the day before were replaced with brand new flowers. Like there's a tremendous amount of work. Here's the key. There's a tremendous amount of work that happens at Disneyland at night that has nothing to do with the work that happens there at the park during the day. These are completely different processes. And in the human body, which is far more complicated than Disneyland, in the human body, the processes that are related to rest and repair are tied to the status of fasting and not to feeding. And so if you want your body to have enough time to identify things that are damaged and replace them, to identify things that need to be eliminated and destroyed, you need to give enough time for this. And so the problem happens is when you eat a meal. I don't care if it's protein, carbohydrates, fats. I mean, it's obviously more with carbohydrates, but it can happen with any of them. If you are eating late in the day, those processes that need to come on for rest and repair will not come on until you go into a state of ketosis, which is essentially fasting. And that's usually about 3 to 4 to even 5 hours after your last meal. So you can see very clearly that people who do intermittent fasting or concentrate their calories in the morning time. So they get up in the morning, they may have breakfast as late as they possibly can, maybe 9 or 10 o'clock, and then they stop eating at around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe even 5:30, let's say. Now you've got a good 4 to 5 hours so that when you go to sleep at 9, 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night, your body is already in the fasting mode and you're able to take advantage of that fasting mode throughout the entire period of your sleep so that all of those things, essentially the analogy is the engineers, the gardeners, all of those things can move in, identify what needs to be fixed so that when you wake up the next morning, not only have you gotten a good night's of sleep, but you've also taken full benefit of that fasting and have rejuvenated your body. If you're eating Okay, and you know this, Doug. We've got restaurants in this country that make their profits on their late night menus, right? I won't say their names, but 9, 10, 11 o'clock, you can go into restaurants and you can eat. Now, we can do that because we've got 21st century technology. We've got refrigerators, heaters, we have employees, we have whole things that allow us to do that. The question is we can do it, but should we do it? For you see, what happens is now you start eating late at night, and now you've basically turned off those genes because ketone bodies, which are the product of fasting, are in some cases the actual agents that turn on these genes in a cascade of events. You've now turned off those genes because you've eaten at night for the next 4 to 5 hours. And so now you're getting a measly maybe 3 hours of this rest and repair. And then boom, you're up again the next morning, and you're having to now open a park that's got gum on the floor. The gift shop is not stocked. You're running Space Mountain again with maybe some cracks in it. You understand what I'm saying? So this is really the key. We haven't even talked about what we're eating. I'm just talking about the timing of what we're eating. And you can see just based on that, there can be a huge difference with when you eat and when you don't eat.
So let's double click on this and dive more into what you eat. Because I do agree with you. I think that you have to have a feeding window that works for you for consistency, right? I think above anything else, like that, it kind of helps develop a framework for you to be like, okay, I know when I'm going to eat my first meal, my second meal, my third meal, my fourth, whatever, etc. And then I know when I'm going to bed. I know when I'm getting up. Like having that schedule, I feel like there's a tremendous amount of benefit to that. But let's like kind of go into that a little bit, like what types of foods we're talking about simply for preventing ourselves from getting sick, longevity, like what types of foods should we focus on?
So let's start with the stuff that's the least controversial. Okay, processed foods. So anything that doesn't look like it did in the natural form is enemy number one. Okay, so highly processed foods are not good for the human body. We've known this for decades. And artificial flavors, artificial colors. Let me give you an example of one of the things I'm talking about. Artificial sweeteners. So what happens when you take something that has an artificial sweetener in it? The the phase of digestion. You know when digestion occurs. This is kind of a trick question they give us in medical school, but it's to show the point. The moment that digestion occurs is as soon as you put something into your mouth. So as soon as you start to crunch on something with your teeth, that's when digestion occurs. And what's going on is that there are neurological signals that are coming from your mouth going to your brain, and it's already setting up things for your stomach so that things are prepared. When you put something sweet into your mouth, what do you think the body has learned that is actually what's going on? There's carbohydrates. And so as a result of that, your pancreas is primed to secrete insulin. And if there's no sugar that's causing the sweetness, what's going to happen to your blood sugar?
It's going to go up.
It's going to go down, actually, right?
Yeah, it's going to go down because there's nothing like to fuel like the insulin.
Exactly. So the issue there is that you're going to get hypoglycemic, which is going to cause a cortisol spike to replenish that glucose so that you don't die. It's kind of an extreme situation, but it drops a little bit, and then that causes a problem. And so repeated bouts of this, essentially, your body learns that when you put something sweet in your mouth, it's not necessarily sugar, and it's kind of like the thing with fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me. Now you basically are developing insulin resistance because you're putting artificial sweet things into your mouth without the actual calories. And that's one of the ideas that scientists have as to why we get insulin resistance when we have some of these artificial substances. We're trying to cheat nutrition. So you walk into your grocery store and you'll see very clearly that the things around the outside of that grocery store generally are things that look like they do in the natural setting, right? You've got fruits, you've got vegetables, you've got meats, you've got all those things. The things that are in the middle of that store are all of the highly processed, packaged, bright colored things that look so good. So one of the things that I would say, and I think this is pretty non-controversial, is really focus on foods that are not processed. And that's one of the things that you can do right off the bat to improve your nutrition. That means avoiding soft drinks. Like, you don't find soft drinks in nature, right? Okay. So if I have a patient, and I see this in my sleep clinic all the time, someone comes in and they are obese, and they say, what's the fastest way I can lose weight? One of the fastest, easiest, low-hanging fruit, excuse the analogy, of ways that you can lose weight is by cutting out soft drinks. That's just simply calories going right into the whole body. I'll give you an example, another example. They did a study once looking at fruits and fruit juices. And this is, again, this is medical scientific reductionism, where we think that the substance itself is the reason for the cause of the results that we get rather than how it's packaged. So this really sends home the idea here is that when they put people on a fruit diet, it actually reduced the incidence of diabetes. When they put them, however, on fruit juices, that actually increased the incidence of diabetes in that arm. And here's the point. What's the difference between those two? The difference between those two is how it's packaged. It was exactly the same amount of carbohydrates when you blend it down and look at the amount of food they were eating. The difference is that in the fruit, it was packaged with fiber. And when you have sugar that is complex with fiber, when you eat that, it gets slowly released into the system. And your body is much more able to deal with that than if you have a huge bolus of carbohydrates in the form of fruit drinks or fruit juice or even sodas. And so, 2 apples is about 39 grams of sugar. A soda can is about 38 grams of sugar. So it's about the same. And I can tell you, 2 apples are far more nutritious than 1 can of soda drink.
It's really interesting to me though, because you'll hear people say, hey, drink your glass of orange juice in the morning, like it's good for like your immune system because of the vitamin C. Do you think that people over-index on stuff like that, and that we should instead focus on like the foods that you just described, like what not to put in our system, what not to do, instead of like trying to search for all these magical foods that have nutrients in them that may or may not help our immunity?
I think that's true. Let me illustrate what you just said with an actual real scientific example. We discovered early, about 2 decades ago, that people with lung cancer that had high indices of vitamin E and beta carotene seemed to do better in terms of survival with lung cancer. So what they did was they took those substances that they found in the diets of those people, they purified it, they packaged it, they put it into high concentrations, and they actually did a randomized controlled trial. This was published in the New England Journal of Medicine, where they gave high doses of beta carotene and vitamin E to lung cancer patients. They had to stop the study early, and not because they had a good result. It was because those patients were dying faster when they were put on those substances. So here's an example once again, where the very same substance given in high doses by itself had a completely different effect than that substance as it was naturally packaged that you would find it in nature. And so I call this gestalt nutrition, where the sum is not, or the sum of the parts is not equal to the whole. It's actually, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And again, that's why I believe that when we eat things in its natural environment, when we eat things that the way they are naturally produced, that's when we get the best results. It seems as though they're packaged in a way that the body has the best way of dealing with those, rather than extracting the constituents, purifying it, and then giving it in high doses.